Book 20, Contemplation 12, Josiah's Reformation, 2 Kings chapters 22 and 23, 2 Chronicles chapters 34 and 35. Yet, if we must alter from ourselves, it is better to be a Manasseh than a Joash. Joash began well and ended ill. Manasseh began ill and ended well. His age varied from his youth. No less than one man's condition can vary from another's. His posterity succeeded in both. Ammon, his son, succeeded in the sins of Manasseh's youth. Josiah, his grandchild, succeeded in the virtues of his age. What a vast difference doth grace make in the same age! Manasseh began his reign at 12 years, Josiah at 8. Manasseh was religiously bred under Hezekiah. Josiah was misnurtured under Ammon. And yet Manasseh runs into absurd idolatries. Josiah is holy and devout. The Spirit of God breathes freely, not confining itself to times or means. No rules can bind the hands of the Almighty. It is an ordinary proof, too true a word, that was said of old, quote, "Woe be to thee, O land, whose king is a child." End quote. The goodness of God makes his own exceptions. Judah never fared better than in the green years of a Josiah. If we may not rather measure youth and age by government and disposition than by years, surely thus Josiah was older with smooth cheeks than Manasseh with grey hairs. Happy is the infancy of princes when it falls into the hands of counselors. A good pattern is no small help for young beginners. Josiah sets his father David before him, not Ammon, not Manasseh. Examples are the best rules for the inexperienced. Where their choice is good, the directions are easiest. The laws of God are the ways of David. Those laws were the rule, those ways were the practice. Good Josiah walks in all the ways of his father David. Even the minority of Josiah was not idle. We cannot be good too early. At 8 years it was enough to have his ear open to hear good counsel, to have his eyes and heart open to seek after God. At 12 he begins to act, and shows well that he hath found the God he sought. Then he addresses himself to purge Judah and Jerusalem from the high places, groves, images, altars, wherewith it was defiled, burning the bones of the idolatrous priests upon their altars, strewing the ashes of the idols upon the graves of them that had sacrificed to them, striving by those fires and mattocks to testify his zealous detestation of all idolatry. The house must be first cleansed, ere it can be garnished. No man will cast away his cost upon unclean heaps. So soon as the temple was purged, Josiah bends his thoughts upon the repairing and beautifying of this house of the Lord. What stir was there in Judah, wherein God's temple suffered not? 6 several times was it pillaged, whether out of force or will. First, Joash king of Judah is fain, by the spoil of it, to stop the mouth of Hazael. Then Joash king of Israel fills his own hands with that sacred spoil in the days of Amaziah. After this, Ahaz rifles it for Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria. Then Hezekiah is forced to ransack the treasures of it for Sennacherib. Yet after, the sacrilege of Manasseh makes that booty of it, which his latter times endeavoured to restore. And now, lastly, Ammon his son neglects the frame, embezzles the furniture of this holy place. The very pile began to complain of age and unrespect. Now comes good Josiah, and, in his 18th year, when other young gallants would have thought of nothing but pleasure and jollity, takes up the latest care of his father David, and gives order for the repairing of the temple. The keepers of the door have received the contribution of all faithful Jews for this pious use. The king sends Shaphan the scribe to Hilkiah the priest to sum it up, and to deliver it unto carpenters and masons for so holy a work. How well doth it beseem the care of a religious prince to set the priests and scribes in hand with re-edifying the temple. The command is the king's, the charge is the high priest's, the execution is the workman's. When the labourers are faithful in doing the work, the high priest in directing it, and the king in enjoining it, God's house cannot fail of a happy perfection. But when any of these slackens, the business must needs languish. How God blesses the devout endeavours of his servants! While Hilkiah was diligently surveying the breaches and reparation of the temple, he lights upon the book of the law. The authentic and original book of God's law was, by a special charge, appointed to be carefully kept within a safe shrine in the sanctuary. In the depraved times of idolatry, some faithful priest, to make sure work, had locked it fast up in some corner of the temple, from the reach of all hands, of all eyes, as knowing how impossible it was for that divine monument otherways to escape the fury of profane guiltiness. Some few transcripts there were, doubtless, parcels of this sacred book in other hands. Neither doubt I, but, as Hilkiah had been formerly well acquainted with this holy volume, now of a long time hid, so the ears of good Josiah had been inured to some passages thereof. But the whole body of these awful records, since the late night of idolatrous confusion and persecution, saw no light till now. This precious treasure doth Hilkiah find, while he digs for the temple. Never man laboured to the reparation of God's church, but he met with a blessing more than he looked for. Hilkiah the priest and Shaphan the scribe do not engross this invaluable wealth into their own hands, nor suppress these more than sacred rolls for their own advantage, but transmit them first to the ears of the king, then by him to the people. It is not the praise of a good scribe to lay up, but to bring forth, both old and new. And if the priest's lips shall keep knowledge, they keep it to impart, not to smother. Quote, the people shall seek the law at his mouth, for he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. So soon as the good king hears the words of the book of the law, and, especially, those dreadful threats of judgment denounced against the idolatries of his Judah, he rends his clothes to show his heart rent with sorrow and fearful expectation of those plagues, and washes his bosom with tears. O gracious tenderness of Josiah! He doth but once hear the law read, and is thus humbled for his father's sins, for the sins of his people. How many of us, after 1,000 hammerings of the menaces of God's law upon our guilty souls, continue yet insensible of our danger? The very reading of this law doth thus affect him. The preaching of it stirs not us. The sins of others struck thus deep with him, our own are slighted by us. A soft heart is the best tempered for God. So physicians are wont to like those bodies best, which are easiest to work upon. O God, make our clay wax, and our wax pliable to thine hand. So shall we be sure to be free either from sin or from the hurt of sin. It is no holy sorrow that sends us not to God. Josiah is not moped with a distractive grief or an astonishing fear, but, in the height of his passion, sends 5 choice messengers to Huldah the prophetess, to inquire of the Lord for himself, for Judah. It is a happy trouble that drives us to this refuge. I do not hear any of these courtiers reply to this godly motion of their young king, Alas, sir, what means this deep perplexity? What needs all this busy inquisition? If your father were idolatrous, what is that to you who have abandoned his sins? If your people were once idolatrous, what is that to you, yea, to them, who have expiated these crimes by their repentance? Have you not carefully reformed all those abuses? Hath not your happy reformation made an abundant amends for those wrongs? Spare your tears, and save the labour of your messengers. All is well, all shall be well. These judgments are for the obstinate. Had we been still guilty, these fears had been just. Were we still in danger, what had we gained by our conversion? Rather as glad to second the religious cares of their young king, they feed his holy anxieties with a just aggravation of peril, and, by their good counsel, whet these his zealous desires of a speedy resolution. That state cannot but be happy, whose priests and peers are ready, as to suggest, so to cherish and execute the devout projects of their sovereigns. The grave priest, the learned scribe, the honourable courtiers do not disdain to knock at the door of a prophetess, neither doth any of them say, it were hard if we should not have so much acquaintance with God as a woman. But, in a humble acknowledgment of her graces, they come to learn the will of God from her mouth. True piety is modest, and stands not upon terms of reputation in the business of God, but willingly honours his gifts in any subject, least of all in itself. The sex is not more noted in Huldah than the condition. As she was a woman, so a wife, the wife of Shalom. Holy matrimony was no hindrance to her divine revelations. She was at once a prophetess in her college, a housewife in her family. It was never the practice of God to confine his graces to virginity. At this very time, the famous prophet Jeremiah flourished. Some years had he already spent in this public service. Why was not he rather consulted by Josiah? It is not unlikely that some prophetical employments called him away at this time from Jerusalem. His presence could not have been balked. Purposely, doubtless, doth God cast his message upon the point of that absence, that he might honour the weaker vessel with his divine oracle, and exercise the humility of so great clients. In the answers of God, it is not to be regarded who speaks, but from whom. The injury redounds to God if the weaknesses of the person cause us to undervalue the authority of the function. As Josiah and his messengers do not despise Huldah because she was a woman, so Huldah doth not flatter Josiah because a king. Quote, Go, tell the man that sent you, thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will bring evil upon this place. End quote. Lo, he that was as God to his subjects is but a man to the prophetess. Neither is the message ever the sweeter, because it is required by a prince. No circumstance may vary the form of divine truth. Evil must befall Jerusalem and Judah, yea, all the words of that book must alight upon the inhabitants of both. In how bad a case we may be, and yet think ourselves not safe only, but happy. These Jews had forgotten their old revolts, and now, having framed themselves to holy courses, promised themselves nothing but peace, when the prophetess foresees and foretells their approaching ruin. Even their old score must be paid, after the opinion of a clear agreement. In vain shall we hope to quit our arrearages by prorogation. This prophetess had immediate visions from God, yet she must speak out of the book. There was never any revelation from the Lord that crossed his writings. His hand and his tongue agree eternally. If that book have cursed Judah, she may not absolve it. Yet what a gracious mixture was here of mercy with severity. Severity to Judah, mercy to Josiah. Judah shall be plagued, and shall become a desolation and a curse. Josiah shall be quietly housed in his grave, before this storm fall upon Judah. His eye shall not see what his people shall feel. It is enough that the expectation of these evils afflicts him. The sense shall not. Whence is this indulgence? Quote, Because thine heart was tender, and thou hast humbled thyself before the Lord. End quote. How happy a thing it is to be a reed unto God's judgments, rather than an oak. The meek and gentle reed stoops, and therefore stands. The oak stands stiffly out against the strongest gust, and therefore is turned up by the roots. At least, let us lament those sins we have not avoided, and mourn for the sins of others, while we hate our own. He that found himself exempted from this vengeance, by his repentance and deep humiliation, would fain find the same way for the deliverance of his people. The same words of the law, therefore, that had wrought upon his heart, are by him caused to be publicly read in the ears of Judah and Jerusalem. The assembly is universal, of priests, prophets, people small and great, because the sin was such, the danger was such, that no man may complain to want information. The law of God sounds in every ear. If our ears be shut up to the law, the sin is ours. But if the law be shut to our ears, the sin is of our governors. Woe be to them that hide God's book from the people, as they would do ratsbane from the eyes of children. Ignorant souls cannot perish without their murder. There is no fear of knowing too much. There is too much fear of practicing too little. Now, if the people do not imitate their king in relenting, they are not worthy to partake with him in his impunity. Howsoever, they shall not want a great example, as of sorrow, so of amendment. Good Josiah stands by the pillar, and solemnly renews his covenant with his God. The people cannot for shame refuse to second him. Even they that looked for a destruction, yet do not withdraw their obedience. God's children may not be sullen under his corrections, but, whether they expect or feel the smart, are no other than dutiful to his awful hand. As a man that finds he hath done something that might endanger the forfeit of his favour, puts himself into some deserving action, whereby he may hope to re-endear himself, so doth Josiah here. No endeavour is enough to testify his zeal to that name of God which was so profaned by his people's idolatry. Whatever monuments were yet remaining of wicked paganism, he defaces with indignation. He burns the vessels of Baal and puts down his Chemerim, destroys the houses of the Sodomites, strews the powder of their idols in the brook Kidron, defiles Tophet, takes away the horses of the sun, burns the chariots of the sun with fire, and omits nothing that might reconcile God, clear Judah, perfect a reformation. Neither is this case confined to Jerusalem and the neighbouring towns, but stretches itself to the utmost coasts of Josiah's kingdom. Bethel was the infamous seat of the pollution of Israel. It seems the heirs of Jeroboam, who set up his golden calf there, enjoyed it not long. The kings of Judah recovered it to their crown, but it had not yet recovered itself from that ancient infection. Thither doth good Josiah send the unhallowed ashes of Baal's relics, to stain that altar first, which he will soon after deface. The time was, and it was no less than 350 years since, that the man of God out of Judah cried against Jeroboam's altar. Quote, O altar, altar, thus saith the Lord, behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee shall he offer the priests of the high places, that burnt incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon thee. End quote. And now is the hour come, wherein every one of those words shall be accomplished. It could not but be a great confirmation to Josiah to see that God so long ago foremarked him for his own, and forenamed him to so zealous a service. All our names are equally foreknown of that divine providence, though not forspoken. Neither can any act pass from us which was not predetermined in that eternal counsel of the Almighty. Neither can any act that is predetermined be unfulfilled upon earth. Intervention of time breaks no square in the divine decree. Our purblind eyes see nothing but that which toucheth their lids. The quick sight of God's prescience sees that as present which is a world off. According to the prediction, the stench of dead men's bones is a fit perfume to send up from this altar to heaven, whose best sacrifices savoured worse in the nostrils of God. And the blood of the idolatrous sacrificers was a meet oblation to that God who had been dishonoured by their burnt offerings to his base co-rivals. Even that prophet who foretold this had his tomb in Bethel, and that tomb had his inscription. His weakness might not rob him of the honour of his sepulchre. How palpably doth these Israelites condemn themselves, while they reserve so famous a monument of their own conviction. It was no prejudice to this holy prophet that his bones lay amongst the sepulchres of idolaters. His epitaph preserved those bones from burning upon that altar, which he had accursed. As the lion might not tear his carcass when he died, so now the fury of the multitude may not violate the very bones in his grave. I do not see Josiah take the relics. I hear him command they shall rest in peace. It is fit the dead bodies of God's saints should be as free from contempt as from superstition. After the removal of these rites of false worship, it is time to bring in the true. Now a solemn Passover shall be kept unto the Lord, by the charge of Josiah. That book of the law sets him the time, place, circumstances of this sacrament. His zeal so carefully follows it that, since the days of Samuel, this feast was never so gloriously, so punctually celebrated. Jerusalem is the place. The 14th day of the first month is the time. The Levites are the actors. A yearly and spotless lamb is the provision. No bone of it is broken. The blood is sprinkled upon the doorposts. It is roasted whole, eaten with sour herbs, with bread unleavened. The remainder is consumed by fire. The law, the sacrifices, had been in vain if the Passover had been neglected. No true Israelite might want, whether this monument of their deliverance past or this type of the Messiah to come. Rather than fail, Josiah's bounty shall supply to Judah lambs for their paschal devotion. No alms is so acceptable as that whereby the soul is furthered.